Hornby's new TT120 range has now been with us for over a year. In that time, the first wave of models has been released and I've experienced most of them. So in today's video, I'm going to take a fresh look at how Hornby's TT range is doing now that it's had a fair chance to become established. Hornby announced their new TT range in October of 2022, and even though TT had been made available by Triang many decades ago, this was an all-new system which started from scratch. The scale is 1 to 120, which places it somewhere between 00 scale and N scale, two well-established and popular scales. In theory though, TT has a number of advantages over these scales. Firstly, you can fit more into a given space than you can with 00 scale, yet it's less fiddly and more accessible than N scale. It's also slightly cheaper than 00 scale, but with much of the same detail. In TT, models are in scale with the track gauge, which is not true with 00. The Hornby TT range is also a cohesive range. Every model is produced to the same modern standards. In Hornby's 00 range, we have models that are recent and detailed, and also models that are dated and frankly rubbish. They also produce some models that are not even DCC ready, and there's even multiple different kinds of coupling in Hornby's range at the same time. And yes, this does cause problems. Hornby's TT range though is all new, so it's all built to the same kind of standards, it's all got a similar level of detail, all uses the same couplings, and every model is compatible with DCC and compatible with Hornby's latest range of decoders. So as you can see, there are lots of advantages to Hornby's TT scale, and they all sound great, and they are great, with Hornby heavily promoting these advantages. But there's one major drawback with introducing a new scale such as TT, and it's the same drawback that you would find when trying to introduce any new scale. It costs a fortune to develop enough products to create a viable alternative to existing scales. Look at 00 scale for instance. There's over 500 different locomotives to choose from, thousands of different wagons and coaches, and countless manufacturers producing accessories, scenery and modelling materials. Hornby's task here was daunting as hell. They had to introduce TT scale and then convince you to choose it instead of, or as well as, 00 or N scale, where there are orders of magnitude more products to choose from. And the big question is this: have they succeeded? I don't think so, not yet. Let's take TT locomotives to start with. TT was announced 16 months ago, and in that time they've only managed to release 3 different locomotives. Yes, there are more on the way, but at the moment just 3 of them are out. This was the A3 in December 2022, the A4 in February 2023, and the 08 Shunter in May 2023. And no more locos have been released over the past 9 months at the time of filming. If another one gets released before this video goes out, then bad luck to me, but even so that would make 4, that's still not a lot. That's 2 L&ER Gresley Pacifics and 1 diesel shunter. A spectacular lack of variety that makes me ask, what on earth was Hornby thinking? Rolling stock is a little better, but not much. They've got the TTA tanker, the towed B and E, 7-plank wagons, vent vans, the 12-ton tanks, and the BR Mark 1 suite of coaches, as well as the Pullman suite of coaches. Other manufacturers like Pico have contributed a small number of other wagons and such, Pico for instance having introduced their 7-plank wagon, which Hornby has also produced, so we've got duplication already. That's a strong start. In my view, this is just not enough to entice beginners to choose TT scale, much less to entice existing modelers to jump ship to TT scale. There's just not enough variety. They're better off to stick with 00. Now I realise I sound like a complete spoilt brat in saying that, because new locomotives and rolling stock cost an awful lot of money and time to develop, and to expect dozens of these within the first year is an awful lot to ask. And as impossible and expensive as this may seem, I still think Hornby needed to do this if they wanted TT scale to revolutionise model railways in the way that they seem to think it would. Slowly releasing 3 locomotives a year probably will lead to success in the long term, And in 7 years' time, when there are 20 or so locos to choose from, then sure, I can see more people giving it a try. But with just 3 locos to choose from at the moment, the incentive just isn't there yet. And the lack of urgency from Hornby on new releases really doesn't inspire much confidence. And this does seem to be reflected by the public. Now, I've reviewed the vast majority of Hornby's TT range, and my videos on TT are among some of the most popular on the platform. So I figure this places me in a fair position to poll my viewers to see what they're doing, and the results are quite shocking. Of over 2,000 people, just 6% of those who voted are beginners who have started with TT scale. 2% have switched to TT scale from another scale, and 5% said they've started modelling TT in addition to another scale. 88% said they decided against modelling TT scale altogether. According to this poll, almost 90% of my viewers are not bothering with TT, and only 2% have made the switch. This might be a problem for Hornby. Why? Because they're not doing well financially. Their annual report for 2023 showed losses in the millions, down from 2022 when they actually made a profit. And even though in my view they haven't invested in enough TT models to make the scale viable yet, they've still spent an absolute fortune on the models they have already developed. And I imagine they can't afford to wait that 7 years or so for the scale to become more widely adopted and profitable. It seems to me they could do with it being profitable right now. Now, to assume that TT isn't making a profit is quite an assumption, and to be clear, that very well might not be the case. I've certainly not seen any public statement from Hornby giving specifics on the success or failure of the scale, but there are some signs that it might not be doing too well. This poll is a good example. A multi-million-pound investment that 90% of people haven't bothered with seems quite precarious. Another sign is that they've now opened up TT to the retailers. Originally, TT was going to be exclusive to Hornby.com. And if you remember my video on the future of model railways, you'll know why Hornby might have preferred to sell direct to the public. Essentially, they don't have to share their profits with another party, the retailers. But sharing profits is better than not making sales. So perhaps this is why the retailers are now being able to stock the range. They're even discounting the range by 10% as well. So considering that, and the fact that the retailers are now taking their share of the revenue, Hornby will be earning much less per product than they were when selling direct to the public. References to the TT range are also quite cryptic in Hornby's annual report for 2023. They stated the revenue for TT to date was 1.5 million. And this was published in August 2023 with finances in the report dated March 2023. So presumably this represents the first 4 or 5 months of TT sales. Impossible to tell whether that's good or not though, because that's just revenue and not profits. They also made strangely worded statements like the first wave of sets all but sold out in a matter of weeks. Which sounds good, but if you look carefully, they're not really saying anything at all with that statement. The first wave, so an undisclosed number, all but sold out, that means they nearly sold out but didn't, in a matter of weeks, so an indeterminate amount of time. So all this statement really tells us for sure is that they did sell some sets, which I think we all know to be true anyway. Now, to be fair, the Flying Scotsman set did indeed sell out for a time, and they mentioned that they had to put some discount bundles together to make up for that. But both sets came back into stock when the remainder of those batches arrived, and they've remained in stock to this day on Hornby's own website, and they're also in plentiful supply at the retailers where they're even discounted. So while that initial wave might have sold out, there's certainly no shortage of them at the moment. Let's imagine Hornby did things differently. Let's say they somehow managed to bring a monster team together to develop 20 different locomotives from different eras, 50 new items of rolling stock, and a whole massive range of scenics. And they somehow managed to get all of this manufactured and released within 1 year. Well, great. That would have made it much more appealing at launch, and that greater range of products would have meant that more customers would be likely to give it a go. But the cost of developing, tooling and manufacturing such a colossal range would have been astronomical, probably into the tens of millions. And considering Hornby's delicate financial situation, they probably weren't in a position to make such a radical investment. Plus, it's still a risk. What if customers just don't want TT regardless of how good it is? Maybe their needs are already met by 00 and N-Scale. And if Hornby was to blow 20 million or something on this new range and people just didn't buy it, well, that would just be it. Hornby would be finished. So thinking about it like that, it seems Hornby just didn't have the means to establish TT in the UK with the urgency required by themselves. But if they had some help from another manufacturer, possibly the task would have been more manageable. And this leads us on to Hornby's biggest mistake. In June 2022, just 4 months before Hornby announced their TT range, Helgen, together with Pico and Gagemaster, announced their own range of TT models, with Helgen producing the locomotives, Gagemaster some accessories, and Pico the track system and also some accessories. Helgen announced a Class 31 in TT scale, and they also announced plans for an 08 shunter and an Austerity 060 saddle tank. Had Helgen gone ahead with these 3 locos, this would have expanded the TT offering quite significantly, giving customers some more much needed options. But what does Hornby do? Just 4 months later, they announce all 3 of these locos in their TT range, the 08 shunter in Phase 1, and the Class 31 and J94 saddle tank in Phase 4. Now right off the bat, the 08 shunter is fair game. This model from Hornby ended up coming out just 11 months after Helgen announced their intention to produce one. This means we can be pretty sure that Hornby's 08 was already well underway by the time Helgen announced theirs. As for Hornby's Class 31 and J94 though, these were announced for TT Phase 4, and just to briefly explain, Phase 2 locomotives haven't even been released yet. These include the Coronation class, the Class 50 and the Class 66. None of these have surfaced yet. This means that Phase 4 models are probably still a couple of years away, or 3 or 4 years away from when Hornby announced them. Typically, the development cycle for a new locomotive is approximately 2 years. So from this we can infer that when Hornby announced these locos in Phase 4, they probably hadn't even started development on them yet, or at the very most they were in the earliest possible stages of development. So it would seem that Hornby's decision to duplicate Helgen's announcements was intentional. They could quite easily have abandoned the Class 31 and the J94 and put their efforts into developing something else, but they didn't. And as a result, Helgen withdrew from TT altogether, saying, "We were gratified to see that our initial trio of locomotive choices for TT was so on the money that all 3 also appeared in the Hornby range. C'est la vie." They followed with, "Such duplication in a new and so far unknown market produces no winners, only losers. We were genuinely excited about the possibilities of this new scale, but in the circumstances and with a heavy heart, we are ceasing development of our TT 120 model range." So, Hornby had a chance to share the impossible burden of TT with another manufacturer, and they blew it by announcing all 3 of the same locomotives. 2 of them, I think, deliberately, because we still haven't seen an ETA for those models yet. It was more important for Hornby to keep TT exclusively for themselves than to share it and improve the chances of its success. Now obviously Helgen didn't have to cancel their range, they could have continued developing those locos, but like they said, the market just can't stand duplication in such a niche scale, and as they rightly said, such duplication produces only losers. So now Hornby are doing this pretty much by themselves, cautiously introducing a small handful of models very slowly to see how they sell. Now this is obviously a safe strategy from a financial point of view, but I just don't think this was the right way to go about it. Without going big and releasing a strong range from day one, I just can't see how the public are supposed to take TT seriously. So if Hornby couldn't afford to release a strong TT range on day one, if they're unwilling to let another manufacturer come in and contribute models because they just duplicate them and quash them with competition, and if they're unable to wait the years that it will take to slowly grow the range and get it adopted en masse, then you have to ask the question, was TT a wise venture for Hornby given their current situation? Well, we just don't know. Maybe, maybe not. It could be making a profit, it could be failing. I think we have to wait and see what happens next to find out. There are some new models on the way, new locos that will diversify the scale by adding more diesel and steam locos from different eras and plenty more rolling stock too. We also need to listen carefully for more announcements from Hornby. If they continue to announce new TT models, that could suggest that things are going well, or at the very least that they haven't given up yet. If this range can survive long enough to become properly established, then I think it really could succeed. But will it? Will Hornby themselves survive long enough to see this through? We don't know yet. We just have to keep our fingers crossed. Let's talk about the models themselves then. Fundamentally, are they any good? Supposing Hornby can grow the range so that it's similar in size to 00, are the models actually worth buying? And the answer, in my opinion, is yes, they are awesome. Like I say, I've looked at most of them and all of them were reasonably impressive. The A4 is comparable, at least, to their 00 model with tons of separate details, a fully painted cab, and generally a fantastic paint job. It also runs beautifully, really well given the scale. Their A3 is also fantastic. It looks amazing. I mean, again, the paintwork here is just out of this world, and it also packs in almost all of the detail that their 00 A3 has, yet it's even cheaper. It's pretty damn compelling. I didn't think their 08 shunter was quite as impressive as it was pretty expensive by comparison and the detail was lacking a little bit, but it still looked great on the whole and it ran excellently. Similarly, the rolling stock is absolutely fine. The coaches are beautiful with excellent running qualities and they even have full working lighting in the case of the Pullmans, which looks excellent. The goods wagons are impressively detailed for the size as well, and while the price is a bit of a problem with them, fundamentally they are good looking models. So yes, the models themselves are not the problem, and I'm sure they will continue to evolve as time goes on. And there's plenty of models that have already been announced which sound pretty decent. We've got the Coronation class, which is estimated for spring 2024, so pretty soon, and this will add some much needed variety to the steam range by covering the LMS. Why the first two TT steam locomotives are both from the same designer, era and region, I have no idea. Obviously Scotsman and Mallard, they're important models to make, but why start with both of those and nothing else? Very strange, so at least the LMS Coronation will change that somewhat. There's also the Class 50, which is due in summer 2024. This class was around for many years and it wasn't withdrawn until 1994, so that means that it covers a great number of eras and it could pique the interest of diesel fans, which again is much needed. They've also got the Class 66 coming in summer 2024, and this thing really picks up from where the Class 50 left off. This covers modern image modelers, they're producing lots of different liveries, and they're also producing the HAA hoppers to go with it, which is a good point because every new loco released obviously needs some rolling stock to pair it with. And who can forget the Class 43 HST, coming in winter 2023 to 24. Again, these things in real life had a huge lifespan, they're very popular, it's a great choice of model to produce. Hopefully all of this stuff will be here very soon, it really needs to be, and hopefully there's a lot more on the way too. There's more work to be done, we need more offerings in steam, we need smaller steam locomotives, smaller tender locos, a tank engine, rolling stock to go with it of course, some pre-grouping locos would be nice to see, again with some rolling stock. This is a huge and ridiculous undertaking. But the thing is, Hornby have undertaken this, they have made that leap of faith, and they've got to commit to TT now 110% if they're going to have a chance of reversing these statistics. If they don't, then TT could go down, and if it does, it might take Hornby with it.